Hello everyone. So this is my presentation for the project-based learning assignment that we have, going over chapter 3, 4, and 5 of the Field Guide to Real-World Projects in the Digital Age, written by Susie Boss and Jane Krause. So for chapter 3 talks about imagining the possibilities. It discusses what project-based learning is, how it can benefit students, what literacy actually is in today's world, about the different types of learning dispositions and different learning functions, the different functions of learning things. So to start with, what is project-based learning? So project-based learning is where students do actual projects that are interesting or can relate to real-world situations to learn or practice the materials they have. In doing so, it typically tends to cross subjects, so if you might be doing a project that has to do with math, you might get into sciences or even possibly like into the arts. With projects, it can show how materials can be used in real-life situations, and teach your students how to act as scientists or as specialists in that specific area. It creates more involvement in your lessons and in the learning process, and it can really put the learning material into perspective. Such as in the book, it gives an example of a teacher who did the 1,000 Names project and had different people, or had their class begin by putting in the names, and then invited parents and they put in their names, and eventually expanded to having people all across the globe starting to put names in so that their students were able to actually see what 1,000 names looked like on this wiki. So second off, in chapter 3, it talks about what is literacy in the digital age. Literacy is nowadays much more than just being able to read and write. And I really like the quote that the book used. Literacy is the ability to identify, understand, interpret, create, communicate, and compute using printed and written materials associated with varying contexts. Literacy involves a continuum of learning to enable an individual to achieve his or her goals, to develop his or her knowledge and potential, and to participate fully on the wider society. So what I grasp from this is literacy, all the different types of literacy, obviously being able to read and write, but also being able to communicate via computers, via internet, via just one-on-one. It's being able to get those points across and to be able to understand those points when they are brought to you. So the different learning dispositions that it presents also in chapter 3 is a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Students with a fixed mindset might say, oh, I'm not smart enough, and they might hate challenges because they're not good enough. They don't know how to do it, and so they'll back away a lot more likely. Students with a growth mindset believe that you can gain knowledge through effort and persistence. These are the students that enjoy challenges and are much more likely to actually go out and seek out challenges and not give up quite as easily. So the different learning functions The different learning functions is like how and why, what do you want to get across? Like, how do you want the students to learn? So students can do research, which involves like deep learning with experts, looking into original works, raw data, and actually just finding all that information. There's also making ideas visible, expressing the ideas creatively, which brings ideas out into the open that lets us talk about it and make actual meaning from it. Collaboration projects invite this, and tools and I'm trying to look at the book. I do apologize. Collaboration gives students a chance to actually work together and build up those skills. Then there's also project management, which really helps students kind of Project management helps students really kind of figure out and lay out and make like milestones for themselves. Reflection and iteration gives students a chance to figure out like the book says, encourage reflection and cycles of improvement. Thoughtful, iterative work becomes excellent work with each revision. So it encourages them to look back on what they've done and figure out how to make it better each time. There's also supported study or enrichment using open educational resources. So we can help our students use things like textbooks, different classes, like on Khan Academy or whatever, curriculum, and other different personal learning options as they work on figuring out their project and how to get information for it. So Chapter 4 talks about strategies for discovery. This chapter is all about how to actually develop your classroom project. Should you purchase one? Should you use one that's already made? Different pitfalls that can happen to your project design, whether it's purchased or self-made. Important features for projects, and how to design your own project. So, should you just get a pre-made project off like Teachers Pay Teachers, or should you make your own? Whatever you choose to do, you should make sure you review them thoroughly, review each one that you look at, and see if you can find student samples so you can get an idea of what your students might actually get out of the project. And even if you get one, it's always okay to adjust it for the needs of your class. So different pitfalls to keep an eye out for, and when you're looking at someone else's project or whether you're creating your own, is these are some of the pitfalls that you might come across. It's too much activities and not enough actual learning that's happening, just more like busy work. Technology layered over traditional practice. So, like if you were doing a research project, instead of just looking in the textbook for the information, have the students look it up and then do a PowerPoint. They're really not learning anything new that they couldn't have done without a quick lecture. Trivial thematic units, such as using like an ocean theme and doing fractions with shells and learning about different fish. It's not actually a project, it's just kind of making everything ocean themed. Not to say that that can't be helpful and engaging for your students, but it's not always the most helpful thing. Another way that projects can fail is that they're way overscripted or have way too many steps. If you have way too much of a set script, if a student comes to you with something that's kind of out of the blue, you're not going to know what to do. And it's going to be weird, and it won't be fun for either of you. And so it's better to have it kind of be fluid so that way you can make adjustments and you can adjust this, you can adjust that, the student can find their own path. And if there's too many steps, it makes it way too complicated. Other pitfalls include not enough focus on formative assessment and assessment that doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel like there's really anything being graded or anything that's making a difference. So important features that most projects share, there's a whole list in the book on page 87 and 88, but these are the ones that I thought were the most important. The projects are loosely designed for flexibility. They center on a driving question and they're structured for inquiry. They capture student interest with compelling real-life or simulated experiences. They're realistic and they reach across subjects. It reaches beyond the school to involve others, such as professionals within the field, and it's structured so that students can actually learn from each other, and that the students learn by doing, instead of just reading it or hearing about it. They actually get to learn by doing the project itself. So, at the end of this, it also talks about how to design your own. So the first thing you want to do is figure out your learning objectives, the skills, the dispositions that you want to teach and encourage. Second is think about what should your students know by the end of the project. What do you want the end result to be? And then plan the theme or the challenge around what you want to do. So what do you want them to learn about, do, or create? What should come out of this? How will you get your students interested? What are you going to say so that you can pull them in and get them interested in the project to start with? And it's really best to leave the project with a bit of ambiguity so students can determine how they want to go around it. Chapter 5 is all about making assessment meaningful. So there are 2 types of assessment, or it discusses the 2 different types of assessments, how to plan for an assessment, rubrics, and different ideas for assessments that can be done, and different tools that we can use for that. So the 2 different types of assessment is formative assessment and summative assessment. Formative assessments are for the learning. It's to figure out where your students are and where they need review and what you need to cover, and it's done many times throughout the lesson. Now, assessments of learning are summative assessments. It gives you a chance to see how much your student has learned over the entire course of the project, and is typically done one time at the very end. So when planning for an assessment, figure out what your students are supposed to be learning from the project, what they can do to demonstrate what they have learned, and then what can a student do to go from not knowing to knowing. And then for a formative assessment, you'll essentially just kind of keep looping this. After you figure out what the student can do to learn what they did not know before, then figure out what they're supposed to learn after that and continue that process until you've come to the end of the project and the end of the assessments. So including a rubric. If a rubric is available to students, they're way more likely to actually understand and be able to go back and reference what it is that you want from them. It gives them really clear expectations for what you want out of the project. Make sure that you include details such as the length of the project, required information, citation requirements, and other aspects that you plan to be grading. You also should include possibly 3 major categories of knowledge, skills, and processes or dispositions according to the textbook. So some options that you can use for assessments and some of the tools that you can use to do these is things like brainstorming and checklists. You can use things like poster boards, or you can use whiteboards. Use small groups where they can discuss and they can teach each other and show each other what they've learned. Concept maps, exit slips, like on their way out, have them write a sentence about what you did today, or that they understand whatever thing it is. You can have them do portfolios where all of their work is being placed into it, or project logs where they say who did what, who spent this much time on, and all that stuff. And that is the end of my presentation. And I hope everyone's had a really good term. And I look forward to having further classes with you guys. Bye!